Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Hope you guys been enjoying the content channel as of late. If you notice, I do not have my camera on because I am currently not clothed because I am facing a little cold. That's why there wasn't any videos out for a few days. Apologies for that. Just went to the beach, decided to not take a shower, and I also had a pretty major anxiety episode also that followed from that. So that might have been triggered by my sickness coming in. So it wasn't the best of days yesterday, but feeling a lot better today. And I figured just to put up something. Uh, and I will be eventually reviewing Happy Gilmore 2. Don't worry, that still is in the books. I'm still going to be creating a video for that soon. Just when I get better, because I'm just kind of wanting to relax. But I figured to do this because I've been watching a few videos while I've been just playing in bed, and I just figured to do kind of a history of sorts of this genre, the superhero genre specifically, and talk about where things have gone, where things are currently going, and what is potentially the future for this genre. Now, I've talked about this plenty of times. I've talked about how there's a very obvious decline going on, and there's a lot of people, or some people, I'll say, that don't see it that way. I've seen some videos, and there was I'm not on social media really. I mean, I fart around on Instagram here and there, but I don't like engage outside of friends. Um, And apparently, on a video I watched on YouTube, there was one person, namely, I think his name's John Roca, who I used to watch on Collider when Collider was a thing and then it fell apart. Um, he went on Twitter and he said that the reason why you're seeing a decline, mainly in like just generally with box office, is that people are stupid. It's not because the movies are just as they are and the theatrical experience is becoming more expensive. No, it's just because we're stupid. Very educated reasonings there. But it's just things like that, extreme things like that, ignorance. I just feel as though the people are just not understanding that this genre is fading and there is a new era on the horizon when it comes to what people will be investing into. So I figured to look at the past 10 years and give you a full recap as to what films have done well and what films have not done well, and giving you an idea of sorts of what things were like pre 2019 and then post 2019, because we all know how 2019 was, at least that little pocket of time, 2018, 2019. We'll get to that. Um, yeah, so we're going to get into this now. The criteria for this, for comparing successes and failures, I'm just going by bare minimums. Um, I'm going by bare minimum what these films would have to do in order to be considered profitable, not margins of what the company expects these films to do, not by this and that. I'm just purely going by investment and just bare minimum what the film had to do. So, so that's how we're going to judge this. So there might be some films that you might think were successful but really aren't, and then other films that you might think that I don't know if they did all that well actually did fairly well. So So let's get into this because there's a lot of things to go through, and I'm going to try to be real quick. So let's get into this. So we first start off in 2015. And 2015 was a very light year for superheroes. No DC content to speak of, because I think at this point they were working on their DC Extended Universe, so there wasn't any content really out there. So mostly just Marvel things. A few things. I'm going to use my mouse just to point stuff out. But namely, Avengers: Age of Ultron did very well, as well as Ant-Man. Ant-Man did okay. It wasn't a strong performance, but did enough to satisfy. And we all know about Fantastic Four. This did not do well at all. So this was a light year. Nothing extreme here, but still, by just comparison, a good year. Not a lot to go by, but good year nonetheless. So that was 2015. Now we get into 2016, and you see a massive amount of content that has just been poured out. Um, Namely, if I count, at least seven films that reside in the superhero genre. Um, and just so we also, before we move forward, I count anything that also relates to the genre. So I'm not just talking about Marvel and DC. So that's why you see things like Ninja Turtles and Max Steel on here. Um, but talking about the successes here, of course, we had Civil War, which I believe ended up being the highest grossing of the year, actually. Suicide Squad, which ended up doing good. Deadpool, of course, did really well. X Men Apocalypse, I could have sworn this didn't do all that great, but actually doing the numbers, it actually did okay. And then Doctor Strange actually did well. And then we had some weak spots here and there. Namely, the biggest one was Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice, which company expectations were for this to do $1 billion. But when you actually look into the numbers of this, um, it it might have done okay, but really it's not. It didn't hit the margins that it really needed to hit. But also, I don't know if it necessarily did make money for the company. I don't know if it necessarily did. Um, so I'm considering it a failure mainly by what I've read about the numbers. Um, God, I could have sworn that it did do okay for the company, but and I think that by general investment, it probably did okay. But I think that they ended up losing money off of this. So this is considered a failure, just mainly because of what the company ended up losing from this more than gaining. And I think by general, just marks gross. I don't think it did the numbers that it literally needed to do to become profitable. So Ninja Turtles didn't do fine, didn't do good. This is coming off Michael Bay's film, or Michael Bay's produced film, so yeah, and there wasn't a large audience for that as well. Max Steel, yeah, I actually saw this, and this is horrible. This is a terrible film. Uh, I don't know if you can catch it anywhere, but I really don't. It's terrible. But that was 2016. So 2016 was largely a very good year, and you see that we're getting bigger in terms of amounts of films that are doing well. Namely, five did well. So now let's roll into 2017, and we see that they get bigger. So now we actually have seven films that did well compared to only two that didn't do well. So now we're at nine superhero films a year. So of course we had Wonder Woman, which did very well, Logan, which did very well, Guardians 2, which did very well, Spider-Man: Homecoming, which did very well, Thor: Ragnarok, which did very well, and these two I count because of just what this literally is by design a superhero film. This I remember seeing a trailer for it, and I could have sworn this was relating to superpowers, so I'm counting this as well. Um, but yeah, all these did very well, respectfully. And the ones that didn't do well, Justice League, which had a major investment attached to it, similar to Batman vs Superman, except in this case, Batman vs Superman went off to do $800 million. This, I think, barely made 200. So yeah, this was a big failure for them. Power Rangers was another one. I think this has more to do with just the nature of what it is. I just think people weren't as big on Power Rangers, at least in a modern age, and clearly it wasn't. It clearly didn't resonate as much because it didn't do all that great. So, but as you can see, the successes just keep on growing, and when we get to 2018, they just don't stop because 2018 saw no failures from the superhero genre. I'm not kidding on that. Literally no failures whatsoever. That includes like any off-brand, not Marvel or DC. Everything superhero related just did outstanding. Aquaman went off to do $1 billion. Black Panther went off to do $1 billion. Avengers: Infinity War went off to do $1 billion. Incredibles 2, I believe, went off to do at least $1 billion. This was a big, big year. Um, and then films like Deadpool 2, Ant-Man and the Wasp, which I believe ended up doing better than the original film. Venom, which surprisingly was a hit, and Into the Spider-Verse, which ended up doing good. A large reason why I believe this was such a big year, as I talked about, was because of this film right here. I think that it's because of anticipation for that film and because of just a lot of the hype that came from it. It was extended to a lot of these films here because there's films on this list that will eventually have sequels, and you will see that they just did not carry the audiences that they believed that they had. Case in point, these two films right here, which we will get into further down the list. But yeah, 2018 was a fantastic year for superhero. I think it pretty much was. I think in terms of quantity, in terms of just individual films making money, this or just becoming profitable, this was easily the best year they ever had. By far and away the best year that the superhero genre has ever had. But if we're just talking about financial success, in terms of just literally making money, that crown goes to 2019 because 2019, of course, saw the release of Avengers Endgame, which went off to do well over $2 billion, becoming one of the highest grossing films of all time. We had Captain Marvel, which also did $1 billion, Spider Man Far From Home, which also did $1 billion, Joker, which went off to do at least $1 billion. This was a big year, I believe, in terms of just film in general. Because there's other films that came out that year as well, like Jurassic World: A Fallen Kingdom, which also came out, did $1 billion as well. This was a big, big year for film. I believe, in terms of just money made, it is the highest grossing year of all time. It was a big, big year. Uh, and there were other films here and there. Glass, which ended up doing good. Brightburn, which did well as well. Did well as well. Kind of what if James Gunn did a mean Superman? And ironic, because then he went off to do a traditional Superman film. There were some small failures here and there. X Men: Dark Phoenix, just the X Men franchise just kind of fizzled out after a little bit, and Shazam was honestly not that strong. I mean, I know some people say it was, but actually looking at its numbers, it really didn't do all that great. Especially when you consider bare minimum, it really didn't do all that great. Um, I guess in some ways the companies thought it was okay because they ended up doing a sequel, but I I don't personally see it. I looked at the numbers myself and they're not particularly strong. So, but but this year generally was massive. This was a massive, massive year, not only for film, but just for the superhero genre as well. So, so that coming in from the 2015 to 2019, when you count all the successes compared to the failures, this was a great time for the superhero genre. 28 films that did well compared to the 8 that didn't do well. So this was a great, great time for the superhero genre. It was booming. It was everywhere. 2018, 2019, purely, as I spoke before, those were big, big years. Big, big years. And largely that has to do with storylines coming to an end. Big climactic parts were coming into play, and a lot of that hype got extended to other projects here and there. And you'll see where my point comes from when we get into the other parts, because the other parts now is, well, the rest of the years that we're not going to get into, because you're going to see where things may take a drastic turn, and and I'll explain why that is. So we're first going to start off with 2020. Now, I know that addressing 2020 is probably unfair because it was, of course, the pandemic. Theaters were shut down, so nobody was literally going out to watch any of these films, but they were still released regardless. So, and quite frankly, at least like three of these movies here. I mean, I know one of these went to Netflix, but let's just say like these two right here. I think that the company was okay with letting these just be released during that specific time because these films were not going to do any business. Even outside of this year, they were not going to do any business. So I think they knew what they were doing releasing these two. Project Power, I don't remember any word about it, so I'm just going to assume that it did not do well because Netflix never spoke about it. Birds of Prey didn't do well, and Wonder Woman 1984 didn't do well. And this was also the result of an HBO Max uh, split release, which also killed tons of films because of just a moronic rationale that was with the company at the time. But yeah, this doesn't really illustrate much of anything because this was the pandemic, right? But it still counts and it still qualifies, so we just have to address that. Now let's go into 2021 because that's when things started to become lifted and people started to go back to the theater. And you see that things are still not all that great. Sony had a good year. Spider-Man and Venom both ended up doing well. Venom dropped off though quite a bit. The first Venom did like something like 800 million. This did 500 million. So a little bit steep drop off compared to what the first film was. So again, kind of illustrative of my point of where certain films came out at a certain time, and outside of that time, they don't have as strong of a pull as they used to. But I think in the case of Venom, this was also another case of timing because this is right when the pandemic was starting to kind of, again, start to settle in a certain capacity, and uh, Venom was like one of the few offerings out there in theaters. So I think that's probably also why. But as you can see, Disney did not have a good year at all. None of their films turned a profit. We don't count Spider-Man because Disney doesn't really make much money off of that. But purely that of Disney, their films, Black Widow, Shang-Chi, Eternals, all didn't do all that well. Zack Snyder's Justice League also did not do all that well, purely because I don't remember the company ever saying anything about it. And to me, when the company doesn't say anything about a film that was released on streaming, that tells me that the film did not do all that well. So, and then the Suicide Squad also didn't do well because this was again a victim of the whole HBO Max same day release strategy, which killed a lot of films. So, but again, there's some people that will use excuses like, oh, we're coming out of the pandemic. Oh, this is, still during a semi lockdown period. Theaters are just reopening. Well, now let's go into 2022 because now we're kind of at the tail end of all that, and let's see where 2022 is at now. And as you can see, 2022 got a little better, but still struggling a little bit. So we had successes here with Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. We had The Batman, which did very well. Thor, Love and Thunder, which went off to do well. But the films that did not do all that well, two of which starred The Rock, and also because The Rock was trying his best to try to take over the DC universe. I don't know if you guys remember that whole thing that was going on. Glad that didn't happen because that was just very bullish, the way he was going about it. But Black Adam did not do all that well. League of Super Pets didn't do well. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness didn't do well purely because of how much that thing cost to make. The production just went nuts. I don't know if that's due to reshoots or delays, but it was very, very costly, and the amount that ended up collecting was not enough to satisfy or to really become, I think, extremely profitable. But yeah. Morbius, we know did not do well. At least we knew that. The studios thought it was, people seemed to enjoy it as much because they ended up re-releasing the thing, which was so dumb. They just bought into a meme. But yeah, this was not particularly. It wasn't a bad year, but it wasn't a great year either. Um, I'm tempted to put Doctor Strange on success, but I don't. I don't think it was. I would have to re-look at the numbers, but I don't think it did all that great. But yeah, but this year was not particularly great. I mean, it wasn't like bad, but it wasn't great. So then you get into 2023, and this is where things take a drastic turn. So still with 3 films that ended up doing fine, but then we have now 6 films that are flopping. The 3 that did well, of course, were Across the Spider-Verse, making more money than the original. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, obviously concluding that trilogy of characters that people like. Makes sense. And then Ninja Turtles also ended up doing fine. Low scale this time around, and also not live action, which a lot of people were not fans of. But failure-wise, there were plenty. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania didn't do all that well. The Marvels really did not do well for the company, ended up being Marvel's worst performing film, I believe, so far theatrically. And again, goes to show that Captain Marvel was the result of hype being surrounded by other films at the time and just by genre at the point of when it came out. It's not purely because people actually cared about that character or cared about those that world, and the box office kind of proves that. And DC especially had a terrible year. The Flash ended up becoming one of the worst grosses for the company's history in recent years. Obviously, one of the worst performing superhero films of all time, if not the worst. I don't know. I'd have to compare the Marvels to the Flash. Shazam! Fury of the Gods did not do well. Aquaman and Lost Kingdom did not do well. Again, illustrating of that time. Again, 2018, 2019. Aquaman went up to $1 billion. But again, it shows that people were just not as interested, you know. And Blue Beetle, which should have gone to streaming, which it was the initial plan, but hey, representation, so they decided to throw that in the theaters, and well, that did not do all well. So, so that rationale that people have behind, oh, well, it's the result of the pandemic, it's because of this and that. We are now in 2023, so, and I remember 2023, those restrictions were now lifted. Things were pretty much normal. Um, so yeah, so no real excuses here. So this was, yeah, not a particularly good year. And unfortunately, that is going to continue into 2024 because, only two things ended up doing well last year. Those were Deadpool and Wolverine and Venom The Last Dance. Um, Now, again, as I said before, Venom: The Last Dance, or with just Venom in general, this is again another decline. Uh, and again, I just find it like I just think of all the films, I feel like this one is the most illustrative of just uh, how people feel uh, about the series. It just kind of trickled out. Uh, and I just think that uh, it just kind of illustrates again just that series was just kind of birthed at specific points of time, really. But when you go look at the failures, uh, yeah, Joker Folie à Dukes, major flop for DC. I've not seen a film like Joker Folie à Dukes where you just saw literally week by week as the film was starting to come out, less and less interest to see the movie itself. It was very, very fascinating to watch. But yeah, it ended up being a major failure for the company. Um, and then following from that, we had Madam Web, Craven the Hunter, pretty much killing Sony's whole spin off era with, of course, you know, now them focusing on Spider Verse content, which we'll talk about in the news roundup. And then The Crow, which I don't understand why they did that. I get it, reboots, remakes are just the norm. But nobody knows what the hell The Crow is at this point. No one knows who that is. Such a niche audience to hit. And just the film also was not well received, so that also didn't help. But as you can see, we are still on that decline. So let's see how this year has gone so far. Wow. Yeah, I'm not exaggerating with this, where none of the films that have come out that are superhero oriented have made money. Not a single one that you see on this list has made money. Captain America: Brave New World ended up not making money. Thunderbolts didn't end up making money. Now, Superman and Fantastic Four, they're still fairly early in their. Well, Superman's been now they're for about a month, but um, they're still doing what they're doing. They're still in theaters. At this point, Superman, I really don't think is going to end up doing much of anything. We've talked about that plenty of times. I just don't think that film's going to reach the marks that it needs to hit. I don't care what James Gunn says. I've been seeing his Twitter replies. I saw like one when I was editing this video or getting ready to shoot this video. saying that no, the film doesn't have to make a certain amount. And he's like telling people like you're a moron if you think that has to do like this much. And I'm like, but it does. It does. Of course it does. Like just look at all the money that's been made to put towards marketing and then the production. It's just like, yeah, of course this film needs to do well. Specifically $700 million. It's not going to reach those points. It's really not going to. And then Fantastic Four, which had a very steep drop off on its second weekend, might in fact hit like maybe 500 million, but we also don't even know what the actual costs are associated with this film because Marvel didn't want to release any numbers, at least any solid numbers, that is. But that is where we are right now. Again, notice less content being produced each year. We've had less content produced each year. Last year we had 6 films. And then in 2023, I believe we had like a plethora of films. We had like, I think like 12, which may in fact play to hold the whole fatigue that was going on at the time and still now. So now we are with just 4, and none of them have turned a profit. And a lot of that has to do also with production, how much things are costing. It's not great. It's not great. There's no reason to be spending as much money as you are right now, especially when you see this clear decline. And no further confirmation of that comes from this number here. So we went from having 28 films doing just gangbusters, doing great, most of which doing $1 billion during the 2015-2019 time. And here we are now with that exact same number. And this is not for dramatic effect. It literally just happened to be the same number. Literally that same number. Now on the other side, being all those films that have now flopped. And only 10 of those films that I have shown made money. All of which are familiarity. All of which are established IPs. They're not original characters. They're not brand new teams. They're not this and that. They are purely of characters that we know of. Sequels, carrying familiar characters. That's what people are more interested in nowadays. So it just goes to show you that this genre is headed towards a certain direction, and it is not on an uphill, it is on a downhill. And the way to keep things at bay is, well, twofold. One is to not have these productions be as steep as they are, being $200 million things. That's just generally for film, because this year has not been great. Generally for film, it's not been great. And a lot of that is attributed to cost, just by investments and choices of content being put on a theatrical medium, the theatrical medium itself, just how much it's costing to just watch a movie nowadays. There's a lot of looming factors at play. But largely, people are also just getting tired. I mean, you saw there was like maybe 12 films that came out in 2023 that were superhero based. I can understand why there's a fatigue going on, especially nowadays, because there's just either too much of it, because that's not even including the TV shows that also people sometimes need to watch, which doesn't include the upcoming DC stuff, you know, or any of the like the DC stuff at the time, with the whole Arrow stuff, like it's just either too much or, as I've established before, there just isn't a firm direction. It's just stuff now, and people wanted storylines. They want established canon, which is what made 2018, 2019 so freaking popular, because there was things afoot. There was things to look forward to. And that's why it extended to all these other projects that you saw, which, as you saw with films like Venom, Aquaman, stuff like that, that stuff wouldn't have really have happened if they did not come out at the time that they did. Because after that, you saw that they ended up having a decline, some of which would still become profitable, some of which would not. Uh, so I think it's just a lot of course correction, a lot of needing to just to look at where things are currently and making better choices, financially, because you can't do $200 million projects anymore. You just can't. It has to be for the right kind of thing. So the more that I think the studios recognize this and cut down on cost and think about things more in the modern age, which is, again, as I've illustrated, the theatrical experience is not as popular as it used to be. People are more fickle, more selective. If you're more understanding of that and understanding just where the genre is really going, which is that it is becoming that of what it was in the 2000s. It is going to become niche, it's going to become selective, and it's going to become small. You're not going to see 12 superhero films come out in the next like 10 years. You're not going to see that, or not see that come out, 12 movies come out again in one specific year. No, like it's probably going to be like how this year transpired. It's going to be like 3 or 4 films, and that's really it. And I think that that's probably where it's going to end up being, but they need to bring costs down. They need to understand what's going to get people to come to the theater. That's why I don't think the DC universe is going to go anywhere, because they're not relying upon notable characters. They're going the route of, well, purely out of creativity, but you can't gamble on such a pricey gamble. You got to do things a little bit more safe, which I know for some people they don't like that, but you guys vote with your wallets. And as far as I can tell, anyway, all you guys care about is, well, the things that you are familiar with and not new things. Yes, I know some of those new things aren't particularly good films, but you're not showing companies a reason to care to invest into new things. So they got to find a way to make this genre still, because clearly it's extremely popular and or extremely profitable for them in the past. So they're not just going to give up on it, but they have to find a way to make it work somehow. And I think that the answer is bringing costs down and catering more to familiarity. If they do that, I think that you'll find yourself in a better place, not in the place they were 2018, 2019, but better than this year was, at least. Because you're not getting back to 2018, 2019. You're just not. Those days are gone. Those days are gone. So this is the new norm now, and you just kind of have to just embrace it at this point, because otherwise you're going to die, you're going to sink, you're going to drown. So you gotta get with the times, as the kids say nowadays, I think. So, but those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts on all of this stuff. You guys let me know your thoughts on all the stuff in the comment section below. Your guys' thoughts on my assessments, which films you think did well versus films that didn't do well. Where do you guys think the genre is going in the next like 10 or years or so? Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.